give reparations. And what is the difference between reparations and the civil rights movement and uh, should we ask for reparations in this political climate? And guess what? Guess what? I had the distinguished, I mean, a scholar and an activist on the show today, Dr. Daniels. I mean, I remember back in the day with the Black Assembly, the Black Agenda, and he's just been writing and being a today, Dr. Daniels.
Well, I'm really, really glad to be able to do this interview, and I'm especially glad to do this interview with you. And I want to commend you for still being on the battlefield, for still doing this work. You are one of those persons who are back in the day who was so instrumental to Black studies, to civil rights, to the National Black Political Assembly. I mean, you've just done incredible work having that unique center because the Black Studies Department at Ohio State University was sort of modeled the idea of community engagement, the academy and the community. And you ran the community center. I mean, it was really, really, really special. And to see you still vibrant and young and African and beautiful and as a queen. I mean, Lord have mercy. Let's get it on.
Well, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for you and all the people in the Black Assembly. We had our boots on the ground.
Right, absolutely.
Talk about doing better things in our community
Right.
to make our community better.
Absolutely.
You've been on the battlefield longer than I have. I mean, you've been out there for decades. And could you explain some of the activists? Let me tell people who you are first before I go into that. You know, you are the president of the Institute of the Black World. You ran for president of the United States. I mean, you ran Jesse Jackson's campaign when he ran for president, and you were executive director of the Institute for Constitutional Law. You teach at the university. Let me see. I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, well, I'm taught at several universities. I began teaching at Youngstown. I started at Youngstown State University, where I taught first, and then I had the honor of teaching in two places that helped keep me alive. Because every time I would go out and get engaged, I would get battered and bruised at doing this work. And I am a scholar activist, but more activist than scholar. So Dr. Edward Crosby at the Department of Pan-African Studies, that's right, at Kent State University. I was one of the founders of the Department of Pan-African Studies there in 1971 or so. I was there on the very day that massacre. Governor Rose ordered the National Guard in, and I was there. The other place that I had the distinction of teaching was one of the other great mentors, one of the other great leaders of the Black Studies Department is my dear beloved friend, both ancestors now, Dr. James Turner, Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell University. But I've also, I taught at Youngstown State, I taught at Worcester College, and then of course I also most recently am now a retired distinguished lecturer at York College, City University of New York.
Wow. And you've been an activist with the Black Assembly and the Rainbow Coalition and now the Institute of the Black World. That is so awesome.
Well, yeah, but and what I often say is, I just turned 38. So if you flip the numbers, you know what my real age is. But I also talk about the fact that I'm really standing for those ancestors that have gone on, including the honorable, brilliant, capable, able Nick Nelson, who was the head of the Black Studies Department at Ohio State University, and so many others, Don Smith, Dr. Ron Walter, Sharshi McIntyre, the roll call goes on and on and on. So, in addition to what you've outlined for the purposes of this conversation, Ashley, I'm really at the center of the global reparations movement because I'm the convener of the National African American Reparations Commission. I also serve as a advisor, senior advisor to the Global Circle for Reparations and Healing. And in addition to that, I also serve on the New York State Reparations Commission because these commissions are developing around the country. And in my capacity as the convener of the National African American Reparations Commission, very much responsible for the strategy and for the work that moved Evanston to the forefront as the first municipality to actually do reparations. So Robin Rue Simmons is on the National African American Reparations Commission, has established a resource center in Evanston, and we have an annual meeting every year coming up on 5 years now in December, I think 3rd to the 5th this year, of reparations people from all across the country who gather there. So that's one of the roles I cherish, is being at the very center of the U.S. and global reparations movement.
Now, how would you compare what it was back in the 70s to right now, different decades? Where are we with reparations right now?
Well, there is no comparison in the sense that reparations, to use a quote from Nkechi Taifa, and your audience should look her up. She's one of the great reparations activists of our time. She was a founding member, charter member of the National African American Reparations Commission, great author and writer. And she wrote a book called Reparations on Fire. So I always quote her because reparations are on fire. I mean, we're no longer see reparations as just something that is the purview of nationalists and Pan-Africanists, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. I'm just saying it began with a group of people who were stubbornly pushing it forward. And in fact, in my generation, mentored by one of the great leaders of our time, one of the great women's, Queen Mother Audley Moore, was personally mentoring me. And I always tell the story because she was so brilliant. She said, my charge is to operate on constipated brains and constipated minds. And my mind was one of them she operated on, because I have no idea what reparations were. But she was pounding, when are you going to get your reparations? Get your reparations. What is reparations? And all of that. So now where we stand, of course, John Conyers was the legislative champion for reparations, having introduced H.R. 40, the bill to, at that stage, study reparations in 1989. That was after the Japanese achieved reparations, $20,000 per affected person, in the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. But it was in COBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks, Reparations for Blacks in America, was that the premier, I call it our legacy organization. They were the ones at the very forefront of pushing reparations, and many of us were gathered around and involved within COBRA. It was in COBRA through a gentleman named Reparations Ray Jenkins who persuaded Conyers to introduce H.R. 40. Now, H.R. 40 is symbolic because H.R. 40 represents the 40 acres and a mule we never got. So H.R. 40 was, and so he introduced that bill every year, religiously, without fail, every year. And of course, the goal was initially to just educate people, including Black people, to understand what is reparations. Can we get reparations? I mean, because a lot of Black people, even if they believed in the concept, just didn't believe it was possible. But through the work that was being done over the many, many years, I mean, just the ebb and flow of so many giants that contributed, to the process. State Senator Bill Owens out of Massachusetts, who introduced the bill to deal with state reparations. Then you had you had the book The Debt by Randall Robinson that introduced a lot of people to the concept. And then in the most recent period, Ta-Nehisi Coates, his article in The Atlantic, a whole nother generation of people who came on board. So it's been growing and growing and growing. And then in the 2020 election, Reverend Al Sharpton with the National African American the National Action Network had a presidential forum, and he asked every one of those candidates, did they support HR 40? And they tripped over themselves saying, yes, yes, yes. And they even wanted to tell us what it was all about. We said, no, 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 just embrace it. We know what it is. We don't need you to define it. But what that did was it mainstreamed the concept. And so, unfortunately, John Conyers became an ancestor, but he passed the torch on to another dynamic woman, the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, out of Houston, Texas. And just, Yolanda, just a little quick anecdote, because, we could go on and on and on. Sheila Jackson Lee inherited the torch from Mickey Leland, right? Mickey Leland. Now, Mickey Leland eventually died in an unfortunate accident. But in 1974, in Columbus, Ohio, I was elected president of the National Black Political Assembly. And the person who nominated me was Dr. John Warfield, head of a Black Studies department at the University of Texas in Austin. And he was accompanied by none other than Mickey Leland.
Wow.
Mickey Leland was right there when I was elected president of the National Black Political Assembly on November 12th, 6th, whatever it is, in 1974. But anyway, so all of these things have combined to push it forward. Now, the other critical thing that people should know is that the reparations movement is global. It always has been global. But in 2014, all of the Caribbean nations, all 15 of them came together. And they basically, even though they're still under the throes of, in a neo-colonial way, these colonial powers, control much of their economies, they're dependent on them and whatever. They said, but the hell with it. Y'all created the mess. You put us in this position through enslavement and colonialism. We are going to demand reparations for Native genocide, which was such a principled position. Because what they're saying is, yeah, African people deserve reparations, but so do all the Native Americans, the millions who were just wiped out, just wiped out by this genocidal intrusion into the Western Hemisphere. So Native genocide and African enslavement. That was a bold move, because now you're not just talking about activists and organizers, you're talking about heads of state who made that declaration. And as a result of that, that gave a big boost to the U.S. and global reparations movement. And of course, the person who emerged as sort of the global guru, a brilliant brother, his name is Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. Professor Beckles is the global public intellectual driving the reparations movement. He also serves as the vice chancellor, which is equivalent to president of the University of the West Indies. And so we had this synergistic relationship going back and forth between CARICOM, because they set up these CARICOM commissions on every island. They had a 10-point program. And in 2015, we invited them to come to the United States for a historic meeting at your college, over which I presided, in which we created the National African American Reparations Commission. In fact, if you go to the website ibw21.org, ibw21.org, you can see the commemoration and celebration of that great event. The other thing I should share with you is initially the bill was just a study bill. It was just, we even said then, well, the revolutionaries said, do we need to study this and something? But it was a way of reducing it to a common denominator. Can't we at least just study the issue? Yeah. And people said, yeah. And so the NAACP, Urban, and all these organizations that previously had came on board, and they said, yeah, let's study, right? But by 2016 or so, we went to John Conyers with the Movement for Black Lives and said, we need to change this from a study bill to a remedy bill. And Congressman Conyers agreed. So the reparations bill that is now before the Congress of the United States is a bill to study, but to also develop reparations proposals for African Americans. So it is not just a study bill, it is to formulate concrete proposals. Now, the other dramatic, development. Not only do you have Evanston, Evanston electrified the world, all across the world, because it demonstrated that reparations was possible, right? But then California followed suit. And, they published a tremendous report. There were some debates that took place because there are some people out there who want to restrict reparations to only, quote unquote, those persons who can trace their lineage to the original descendants of enslavement. That's a big controversy. But nonetheless, that bill, I mean, it passed. They published a report that's about 1,500 pages. They have active legislation that is being promulgated and put forth. And then now New York, it has a commission, right? And I'm on the commission for New York as well. New Jersey is contemplating a commission. And unfortunately, Governor Wes Moore, African American, just vetoed a proposal in Maryland that ultimately will pass because it had a veto proof majority. So it's going to come into place. So that's a long way of answering your question by saying reparations is on fire. It is no longer a marginal issue.
But what are you doing about the black leadership and the black politicians that are blocking reparations? When we think they give us the idea that they're going to be working with us, and then when it comes down to it, they say, "Well, maybe it's not time yet." What is?
Well, but that is largely changed. I mean, just to give you an example, with the HR 40 in the early days, I mean, there was not, we weren't really trying to worry about how many co-sponsors. We just wanted enough to use it as a tool. It never had more than about 50 sponsors. It didn't even have all the people with the Congressional Black Caucus were on it. But in the last Congress, not this one, the previous Congress before Biden left, we had, I want you to hear this, 189 co-sponsors. And that was every member of the Congressional Black Caucus. You had members from the Latino Caucus, the Progressive Caucus, and you had leadership from Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker on the Senate side with S40, and about 50% of the senators, black and white. So there's not the kind of resistance that we had back in the day. Most of the elected officials have been on board, and so people like Cory Booker and others. But not only that, the ACLU, the Center for American Progress, Human Rights Watch, the organizations that you would not have thought, and tremendous support from Japanese Americans. I do mean tremendous support from Japanese Americans and the faith community.
So it is on fire.
It is on fire. It's on fire. It's going state by state by state. It's on fire, and reparations are actually happening. Not only are they happening in the U.S., the Episcopal Church came forward and committed, I think, about $10 million. I may have the number wrong, but it is a significant amount, though. I mean, it could be more. The law school, Georgetown University Law School, they're in active negotiation with descendants because they profited from enslavement by way of the Jesuits and so forth. Then if you go internationally, the Anglican Church has come forward with a commitment of $100 million. And just within the last 2 weeks, finally, somebody in Tulsa was able to come forward and say $105 million to the first African American mayor who is committed to create a trust. And much more needs to be done. But I'm saying, it's like the old folks used to say, and I'll be one of them now, we're showing what we want to be, showing what we're going to be, but we're showing what we were.
That's right. So it's moving. If we would have received those 40 acres and a mule when they said that they were going to give it to us, what's it look like now for African American?
Well, I think the thing is, and by the way, the audience can go to our website, ibw21.org, and we have a reparations resource center because we have a 10-point reparations program. And that 10-point reparations program helps to illustrate what reparations should look like. And you were beginning to ask the question earlier, because reparations is specifically for the spiritual, physical, spiritual, cultural domination or destruction of a group of people by another nation or group of people. And there are many, many other groups who have received reparations. The most notable, most largest case have been, of course, the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust in World War II. But there have been the Aleuts and the Eskimos and in Canada. There are various groups that have received reparations, so it's not unprecedented. For African Americans, it's for enslavement, but also the legacies of enslavement. For example, we went off and fought in every war, including the Second World War. There were many, many black veterans who never got the GI Bill, nor the Federal Housing Authority, or the agricultural agencies, ag agencies in the South. So all of those are involved. And I say that because we now have, and thanks to President Biden and a number of other people, a push around equity policy. Equity is to make sure that there are not disparities that are out there. Well, that is moving forward to make sure that from this point forward, there is no disparities or inequalities. But it's not reparations. Reparations is for the past and all of the accumulated harms that occurred beyond that. We know right now we need jobs, we need the education, we need housing, we need all those things. So somebody jumps up and says, we got a jobs program. Well, that's not reparation. That's ordinary public policy, which we need too. So it's not either or, it's both. Reparations is for those racially exclusionary, targeted programs post enslavement, and it includes gentrification and redlining, the war on drugs. I mean, there are so many different areas that are out there. But there are two things I think that are very important. That is that because some people now, it's so popular, everybody, when is I'm going to get my check? I mean, where's the cash? Well, reparations cannot be reduced to just a check. There's no amount of money in the first place that could ever pay us for the Holocaust of enslavement, the Ma'afa. But that does not mean that direct payments, as we call it in NARC, are not in order. So every one of those descendants, living and the descendants of the Tulsa massacre, are entitled to compensation. And it might be in the form of a cash payment or voucher or whatever. In Evanston, it's around housing. It's a direct benefit. But here's the thing that we want to stress with people. Even in Tulsa or the Greenwood district, even if descendants get benefits, direct benefits, how do you rebuild Greenwood? How do you rebuild the community? So what we stress in NARC, National African American Reparations Committee, is something we call community benefits. And what that would mean is land, for example. How do you build hospitals, educational institutions? How do you have a communications infrastructure, healthcare? I mean, you see what I'm saying? This benefits everybody. This is building the community, not just an individual per se. So it doesn't mean that we can't have direct benefits, but community benefits in a way are and it's, you could argue, is almost the priority. So if you go to CARICOM, they don't deal with direct benefits at all. Everything that CARICOM is doing is the systemic structural issues of repairing their health system, educational system, all of those kind of things are built in. But when you go to the website ibw21.org, you'll see the 10-point program, and that 10-point program helps you to understand not only direct benefits, but also community benefits.
Great. Now, how are people identifying themselves? Because we're having an issue. Some people don't want to be called Black Americans. Some people want to be called African Americans. Some people want to be called Foundation Americans. What is the common name that people are using to identify themselves?
Well, I think overwhelmingly, what we find in the U.S. today is overwhelmingly people are identifying as Black, and the vast majority are identifying as African Americans. Now, what's emerging, as I said before, is a relatively new group of people who've come onto the scene, and they are advancing a kind of anti-immigrant, nativist, anti-Pan-Africanist view on reparations. And that is not shared by the majority, but they are very, very passionate about it. And their whole perspective is that it ought to be, and the group called ADIOS was the very beginning of that, the American descendants of slavery. And by the way, that kind of gives it away at one level, because the vast majority of Black people in this country kind of have a view that we ain't quite ready to put that American first. You know what I mean? You can go through most communities and you can tell where the black community is and where the white community ends by what on a 4th of July holiday. You go through, I go out here on Long Island, I see American flags everywhere. I go through black community, I don't see no American flag. It's not that black people are not patriotic. We fought in every war, but we're not that gung ho. We gotta wave the flag kind of thing. So we don't, you very seldom do you somebody say American black or American African.
Many people fought in the war and they to come back to face systemic
Oh,
racism.
of course they did. So that's a kind of giveaway in a way, in terms of that whole piece. But giving them the benefit of the doubt. The problem is that, and then they want you to trace your lineage. You got to take a test and all that kind of stuff. Well, the problem is definitionally. Definitionally, it's reparations for African Americans or Black Americans or found, however you want to describe it, is for enslavement, but it's for much more than that. It is for, in fact, all of the racially exclusionary policies post-emancipation. So Abner Lima and folks like that, who were murdered and or were tortured or whatever, or redlining, all of that's. And so you might be an immigrant who's in a community, but you are entitled on that basis. Plus, when you really think about it, it's hard to trace in the first place. But we just got back. I just got back from Grenada, where we uplifted the life and legacy of Louise Langdon Little, the mother of Malcolm X. Right now, so are we saying that we're going to deny the mother of Malcolm X or his descendants or Harry Belafonte or Shirley Chisholm or Kwame Ture? Or Marcus Garvey? They're not going to get no reparations. I mean, when you put it that way, most people understand. Now, do we have some issues in the community with newly arriving immigrants that we need to work out? We do, because there's some people who kind of don't understand that you're coming across a bridge that was built by the Black Freedom struggle. But on that Black Freedom trail were also people who were immigrants. I mean, Marcus Garvey being perhaps the most famous of them, and others. So, but there are some issues that are out there that we can resolve and we will resolve. But we're not becoming anti-Pan-Africanists, saying, and let me just say, this is the other reason when I talked about this session about healing. The global circle for reparations and healing, and your audience will most likely know a sister who wrote the book Post-Traumatic Slavery Syndrome, Dr. Joy DeGroot, a leading healer. You should also know Dr. Enola Air, Esquire, as well. We're focusing on dealing and debunking, frankly, this whole notion that they stole us. This whole idea of, Africans stole us and brought us over here and whatever. Now, it is not. It is the case that there was some complicity, to be sure, but it's very easily discussed because in the book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Walter Rodney lays it out, and that is Africans did not raise up one day and initiate the transatlantic slave trade. We didn't do that, right? I mean, this is like the drug trafficking. Black people didn't start the drug traffic. We didn't initiate it. Now, there were black people who became drug dealers, but in that sense, that's a problem because they should not have been involved, and we don't want people involved in this illicit traffic. But black people the Africans were neither the initiators nor were Africans the primary beneficiaries of enslavement. And in fact, largely it was done at gunpoint. It was done, people were enforced, people were terrorized, people were, into being engaged and involved. And there is great grief on the continent about it. I mean, Ghana is actually giving away land, and other countries are coming forward. They are apologizing. But we're going to have a series, it may take a 5-year process to heal this wound between African Americans, Africans in the diaspora, the sons and daughters who were enslaved and who came, and to any degree that there was complicity, we certainly want to heal that wound. The other thing is that people have to understand different definitions of slavery. In the United States of America, among Native Americans, very often, Native Africans ran away and they became a part of Native nations. they were kind of like servants. You know what I mean, for a period of time. But then after a while, they became a part of the nation, a part of this. And the definition in Africa, there were quote unquote slaves. They were not really slaves. They were not chattel slaves. They were not material. They were not reduced to less than a human being. And so their families would be incorporated and integrated into the new nation and new ethnic group and whatever. But nonetheless, it was a problem that we need to discuss. But people need to thoroughly understand it, and then we need to confront each other, meet with each other, talk to each other, resolve it so we are united as an African people, and this wound is finally healed once and for all.
Yes. Well, when we receive reparations, will that erase some of the systemic racism and some of the harm for the next generation?
Well, it will be on that path, and properly understood, which a lot of people don't understand, is that the movement for reparations is kind of a cleanser. Because when you see what I'm saying, you can't, first of all, you must acknowledge the crime, and then you must apologize. Then you must go through a series of stages dealing with restitution and compensation and non repetition of, I mean, there's a whole process until you get to the point what we would call full repair or full reparations. So going through that process means by of necessity, we do not want to replicate the systems that in fact produced the Holocaust of enslavement in the first place, or colonialism. So those values, so it is a way of cleansing. And one of the things that's happening is, who would have ever believed that these European nations are stepping up? You know, yeah, Germany is stepping up, Denmark, oh, I mean, a number of these nations. And one of the reasons they're stepping up is because we were dispersed as Africans into those territories, into those nations. And we have become a part of those nations. So now we have political power. And it's interesting because if you're looking at Great Britain, black is not only people of African descent, it's almost anybody from India, Asia, they all identify, they kind of identify as a block of black people because they were all.
Identify as being something else.
Well, it's kind of like an umbrella. I mean, they see them. We would say people of color, but it's kind of a sense of all of those who were enslaved, or all of those who were the victims of British colonialism, are up inside of there now, and some of them are holding mayors and different positions and so forth and so on, and they become a force. So when you combine that with progressives or whites who have, and there always have been whites, are going, I mean, there were abolitionists in this country and so forth. We had to debate it because Frederick Douglass said to William Lloyd Garrison, well, we appreciate your support, but we don't need you to speak for us. You know what I mean? He would say, too long have others spoken for us, we can speak for ourselves. But we've always had allies, not the majority, but enough. So when you combine in Britain with the Labour Party and people who are more liberal, then you got a force that can begin to put pressure on those institutions to deal with the grievances. And by the way, one of the greatest grievances of all was Haiti, where Haiti, having won its independence in the greatest revolution of all time, when you use human rights as a yardstick, because the Haitians not only liberated themselves, they said anybody who's enslaved who comes to Haiti will be free, will be liberated. The American Revolution did not do that. The French Revolution did not do that. The Haitian Revolution did that. But under threat of reinvasion, the French extracted a reverse reparations of $100 million, 100 million francs, and they straddle Haiti with that well up into the 20th century before they actually ended up being able to to pay that off. And so that's why Haiti, in large measure, has always been behind, stigmatized, marginalized, invaded. I mean, just it's had a hell of a history. But when almost everybody's united in saying France has got to pay. They have got to repay Haiti those with interest in order for Haiti to be rebuilt.
The Institute of the Black World, how many chapters do you have that is lobbying for reparations?
Well, we don't. Well, first of all, we're not a chapter-based organization. We're really we're a resource facilitator. We're good
Okay.
faith convener and gathering and gather folk together. And we have various initiatives, and it's always collaborative initiatives. So
Okay.
NARC and reparations is one arm of what we do. We're also involved in dealing with the issue of gentrification. We're dealing with the issue of reimagining policing, law enforcement, and public safety. We have a broad range of initiatives that we also work on. So, and then we have something, and I'm going to encourage our audience, including you, to
Yes.
go something called Black World Media Network.
Okay.
Black World Media Network. It is a legacy project of Don Rojas. Don Rojas was the press secretary for Maurice Bishop of the People's Revolutionary
Yeah.
Government of Grenada,
Yeah.
and it is the beauty of it is 24/7 positive music, no garbage, no garbage. Yeah, but here's Sister Yolanda, the beauty of it all. It's from all over the Pan African world. So you hear something from South Africa one minute, then you're hearing something from the U.S., then you're hearing something from Jamaica, then you're hearing something from the diaspora,
Yeah.
and you may hear Afrobeat and all. I
Yeah.
mean, and reggae,
They're
but
not telling us B word, not none of that.
oh, none of that. No, no, no,
Oh,
no, no. There's a gospel hour up in there, and you also get commentaries and you get news. And so 6 times a day, it's like our own BBC reporting the news. So Black World Media Network, yeah, Black, yeah, and you download it. You can download it on your computer or you can download it on your phone. And
wow.
so spread the word, because what we're trying to build it up enough so that we can begin. We're not charged. There's no charge, but we want to build it up enough so we can begin to get digital ads to help finance it and so forth. So that's a project of.
Your recommendation for the next generation? What should we be working on, and what are you recommending for the future generations?
Well, the future generation is here, and it's like Fignon said, each generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And I think that this generation is very much engaged on the front lines, particularly fighting against police brutality, the criminal punishment system. They are abolitionists primarily. They want to abolish it. They are fighting for reparations. They're on the front lines of finally beginning to get into the whole process of electoral politics. In fact, there's a sister from right there in Columbus. Oh Lord, what is her name? She works closely with the movement for Black Lives. Oh God, and because I knew when I heard about her, I knew some of her people and whatever. So, and there's a new political party called the Working Families Party. The Working Families Party, that is kind of the inheritor of the work that we did out of Gary and the National Black Independent Political Party. Is headed by Maurice Mitchell,
Okay.
and so they're moving. One of the things that we really need to do is we need to do more work in terms of political literacy and civic engagement,
Yes.
deepening it. And we need people like you. And in fact, I'm getting ready to put forth a concept called the IBW Center for Cross Generational Knowledge.
Yes.
Because what we're
Yes.
finding is, I just did a video, by the way, about Gary, just telling people, right? Because the young people are saying they want to do Gary, but they think you can just do Gary. I said, no, no, no. You got to understand what went into that, right?
Yes.
It may be possible, and I think it is time for another Gary. But there are
Yes.
key challenges and questions we have to pose. It was not
Yes.
just something where everybody just ran somewhere and Gary. It took a lot. You know what it
Yes.
took. So we want to be able to share that knowledge. And so that's one of the things I'm feeling very excited about more and more and more, that I have mentees, or I mean people who I'm sharing. So I'm just trying to build IBW to the point that it's my legacy project. It's strong enough so I can become this elder statesman who's just helping to teach and share and whatnot.